So these images don't really exist. I generated them using artificial intelligence, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. There has been a lot of concern lately about the takeover of AI and what the effect could be on art and artists. So I just wanted to share my experience with it. It definitely had an effect on my art practice, but probably not in the way that you think. So I started making daily collages back in 2018 as a way of injecting some intuition and discipline into my art practice. I had been painting for a while, but I was getting tired of using photo references for my paintings, and I wanted to explore a looser approach to making images where the results weren't so predetermined, and I would just have a way to explore color relationships, composition, and mark making without the pressure of making sellable work. So I was posting these collages daily to social media, and by 2021, I had amassed thousands of these collages. And around that same time, there was a lot of buzz about recent developments in computing technology with the public introduction of large language models such as ChatGPT, and also the text to image programs like DALL-E and Midjourney. I also read an article in the online art magazine hyperallergic.com where it described this artist, Matteo Rutini, who had used neural networks to generate a series of images of fake minimalist sculpture based on a data set of photos of real existing minimalist sculpture. So, a GAN stands for a Generative Adversarial Network. And what it is, I have a rough diagram that kind of attempts to explain this relationship, but the idea is that you have two neural networks. One is known as the generator, and the other is known as the discriminator. And basically, they will play off each other to produce a unlimited series of images. The generator, with the help of a noise image, will produce images based on the original image source dataset, and the discriminator essentially judges these images whether they pass or fail. And with this process, they eventually train to create images that will resemble more and more the original image sources. So, an interesting fact is that the generator can't produce a coherent result without the help of a noise image to stabilize the training procedure. And a noise image here is just a super randomly pixelated black and white image. It's kind of like the static signal on old TV sets. The noise image provides a constraint that helps manifest these artificial images. It makes me think of creativity theories where you need to work with a bit of resistance or randomness to come up with a new, stronger idea. I confess I am not a coder and I can't really explain the intricacies of all the programming that's involved here, but it's kind of like the magic of most technology. We kind of get how to use it, but we couldn't really build it by ourselves. So I've always been really curious about the inevitable relationship between the tools of technology and how it affects what we are visualizing. And I've always explored digital graphic tools alongside a more traditional art practice. And I was really curious to see what would happen with this data set that I already had of these collage images. I could use that to train again to produce fake images based on my own real collage images. I was just really curious of what this would look like, what this GAN would produce for me. Could a GAN function as a digital twin that would produce an infinite supply of these artificial collage images? What would these even look like? Would it show me patterns that I wasn't even aware of that I was using when I was making these collages? I just really wanted to understand and explore what this technology could mean for artists and what would it produce based on my own collage images as a data set. So, artists have always been using tools and learning skills to depict the human experience and sift for meaning in the world. This cycle creates a feedback loop where the perception of the world changes with the incorporation of these tools. The artist David Hockney outlines this concept in his book Secret Knowledge, where he theorizes that artists were using optical aids like lenses and camera lucidas to depict subjects in space as early as the 1400s. These artists weren't simply tracing. The point is that this technology enabled a new way of seeing, which ratchets up new possibilities for how we think, how we perceive, and how we participate in the world. I think here about how the scientific revolution preceded the establishment of point perspective and a mathematical conception of depicting space. So, like anyone looking to figure out how to do things nowadays, I went onto the internet and I followed a rabbit trail of internet posts and YouTube videos to figure out how to start this GAN training. And in the end, I found Jeff Heaton's YouTube channel, and he had a video that essentially explained how to use NVIDIA's StyleGAN 2, complete with plug and play code, to generate artificial images based on your own data set of original images. The only other things that I needed were a Google Drive account and a pro subscription to Google Colab because you can't train a GAN on your home computer. These machines are really energy intense, and you need the resources of Google to help do the GAN training. And I also had the help of my son, who was taking some coding classes at university. So I started training this GAN over a few weeks during the spring of 2022, and it trained over a few days. What would happen is you could use Google Colab for about 24 hours before you got kicked off. So you had to time your files to generate these pickle files, which produced a image set known as seeds, where you could see the GAN training process in action. And when the computing time expired at Google Colab, you just picked up the training the next day based on your last pickle file. So here is a movie that shows the initial series of seed sets as they were produced. And you can see here through a kind of chaotic cloud of color, these blobby shapes start to emerge. It's really similar to watching time-lapse cell division slides, where gradually you can see a form start to take place. So these amorphous pixel blobs gradually assume a more definite shape, and they begin to resemble more and more a collage-like image. So, from a series of gradually improving iterations, there appeared to be something that resembled a collage by around seed 160. So, here is the first GAN image, which was published via Instagram on June 7th, 2022. So, over several days, I quickly gathered hundreds and hundreds of these fake collage images. Typically, each pickle file would produce a seed image that consisted of 120 images at 512 by 512 pixels. They each had similar composition structure and small variations of color and shape between the images. Each image looked proportionally familiar to me and used shapes and harmonious color combinations that I found interesting. They were all fascinating and uncanny at the same time. Individually, each one was technically unique, but they had this relentless sameness and a kind of artificial slickness, like they were made out of plastic or something. It reminded me of the Ian McGilchrist book, The Master and His Emissary. McGilchrist is a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, philosopher, and poet who describes different aspects and roles of the left and right hemispheres of the human brain. According to him, the left hemisphere has an attentional mode that is quite rational and reductive and controlling, whereas the right hemisphere intuits a bigger picture of relationships flowing in time and is aware of ephemeral qualities like emotions and beauty. His thesis is that our current culture is being increasingly dominated by the overconfident and almost sociopathic thinking typical of this left brain emissary, and it is really crucial that our society regain the balance and control of a more subtle and nuanced right-brained master. This dynamic can be witnessed in just the rise of industrialization and mass manufacturing and its impact on everyday life, where people are seen more and more as units of production instead of uh, existing within an embodied network of relationships. McGilchrist insists that artificial intelligence is just another example of this left hemisphere overreach, and we need to be really aware of what we are paying attention to and how we are being formed by what we are attending to. So while the artificial images generated by the GAN did resemble my handmade collages, there was something about the relentless production that also illustrated a smothering, dominating aspect of this left hemisphere mode to me. And this is where it gets a bit weird. This suffocating quality about the quick, frictionless production of thousands and thousands of my own collage-like images rekindled a desire to revisit slower and more traditional artistic practices and engage more with messy art materials. I started to regularly attend open life drawing sessions on a weekly basis, and I also started to maintain a really consistent sketchbook habit. I came to further appreciate the awkwardness of my own drawing, and issues of optical exactness were really less important than the pleasure of the process and the poetry of just arranging colors, shapes, and lines on a page. There definitely does seem to be a will to digitize all facets of life that is creeping into every corner nowadays. And there has been a lot of alarm about AI and its effect on art and artists. But first of all, I think we need to remember that these systems function as tools first and that we hold the responsibility regarding their use. Ultimately, our participation in this big, complex world can never really adequately be explained or contained by binary systems of logical information processing. And secondly, these machines have a fundamental parasitic aspect and will always need real human data to generate these comparative fakes or artificial images. And in fact, when AI is just using its own data to train itself, the results just get more and more incoherent and unintelligible. And thirdly, the focus on the result or the finished piece misses a huge aspect of why we create art in the first place. For me, it's the tactile process of the making itself with all the awkwardness and the mistakes and the detours. And lastly, it ignores the viewer who these images are being created for. I think humans seem to have a profound need to observe other humans, either through direct mimicry or by indirectly observing or looking at work made by other humans. And while the proliferation of these images produced by AI can be superficially interesting, it can't really compete with the depth of human made art. And this might be all the more valued as we always continually strive to create meaning in the world. While I think we should resist submitting our artistic agency just blindly to these algorithms, I think we can't ignore the potential of these new tools. Like any tool, this technology could relieve artists of maybe the more mundane aspects of commercial art production, but it will never create anything new per se. Personally, I'm still fascinated by the questions posed by just how these AI images are being generated. And I find it interesting that by playing with this technology, we are also revealing more about the mysteries of perception and just really the complexity involved in navigating 3D space. I think there is a lot we can discover and understand about ourselves as humans by exploring these processes, as long as we remain aware of what the limitations of this technology can be. And at the end of the day, I don't think that training a GAN on a data set of my own images revealed anything truly unique about the way that I make collages. Although it was a little bit like having a tireless digital twin assistant that would produce these elevated placeholder images for me. And a placeholder is a graphics design term where you use a temporary image as a substitution for the eventual placement of a real image. We do live in confusing and unprecedented times for art and artists. There has never been so many people making art, and there has never been such an ability to share these images with a global audience via the internet. And now there seems to be, with that, a constant pressure of producing a steady supply of work for the consumption of social media. So while I think AI will never replace art or artists, one possible function is a defense against these insatiable demands of social media, because the quick production of these GAN generated images could be used as sort of placeholder images, um, by reserving a space for the artist in this kind of new cacophonous digital landscape. So you can find my handmade art posted on Instagram here and on X here. And I have created a new account to post my GAN collages. They are now being bot posted via X on this account here. I thought it was fitting that they were posted by a bot, because it's just another way of feeding the algorithm, let's say. One thing I should mention is that the code that I used to train the GAN no longer functions. It has something to do with a TensorFlow update. There's some issue with the code. Anyway, it seems typical of just how technology works generally. It will work until it doesn't work, and then you just have to figure something else out. And that's enough.